take us back a bit
Yeah.
before we talk about, the intermediate time. Tell us how you grew up, how martial arts became such an important part of your life. And I mean, now you've built Kovars into one of the most respected and revered martial arts organizations, not only in the country, but in the world. I mean, how did you get infected with that?
Well, with a lot of help, by the way. I was just part of the guy on the team. Right?
I understand.
But, it's in the mid-'60s, I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I saw a silhouette of a guy doing a flying sidekick on like a billboard somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what it was, but I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Is that your logo?
What? No, but I guess it could be. But I still can visualize it, and so it took years. My older brother Tim went away to college. When he went away to college, he took a year of martial arts. He came back and said, "You got to let Dave do this." And so I just jumped in both feet first and fell into school right out of high school. And this is just always what I've loved to do, and I still do.
And did you start by opening up your own facility?
I had
right out of the gate.
Well, basically what happened was I was teaching for my instructor school in high school, but I got paid every now and then. It was kind of like if you felt like paying me, you paid me, and this was back in the 70s, and nobody did this for a living. There was literally in Sacramento County right now. There's about 250 martial arts schools in Sacramento County. At the time, there was probably 15. Right, and most of those were part-time schools, and so there was not anybody's psyche that you're going to go open up a martial arts school. What had happened is I graduated from high school, and I was still teaching at the martial arts school, and I was working at Bob Frank Chevrolet as a lot boy, and going to American River College, and one of a gentleman that had opened up a school that was a friend of mine and one of my instructor students as well. Was struggling. It was in North Highlands, right across from Gate 4 McClellan Air Force Base. And so I talked to my parents, and they loaned me the money. It wasn't a lot of money to get into it. And I told them that would get me through college. And that was the deal. Okay, you got to stay in school. And so I just kind of never looked back.
And were you competing at the time?
Yeah, all the time. Okay. All the time. Yeah, it was kind of I was living at home. My rent was $260 a month, right?
To your parents?
No, I wish.
Oh, you rent for the studio.
I rent for the studio. I had 1,000 square feet, a second floor, and so actually the first full year of business in 1979, I still have the books. I did $11,900 the first full year.
You probably felt rich.
I lived at home. I had enough money to go to tournaments and take my girlfriend out for dinner every now and then. It was a good life, And then I got a day job painting houses for a few years, and then Karate Kid kicked in. And it came out in 1984, and literally up until then there was almost no kids doing martial arts, and literally overnight it just transformed. And I'd already kind of enjoyed working with kids. I seemed to be naturally pretty good at it, so I was positioned. It was kind of like the right place, right time, right product. And so
right guy. Don't forget the right guy.
Well, I certainly enjoyed what I'm doing. So in the late 80s, we just blew up, And then in 1992, we bought the current building, which at the time was the largest school in the country. We actually had over 900 members in that location, which is most martial arts schools have 80, just to put it in perspective, right? And we slowly evolved and started opening up more locations, et cetera. Yeah.
So what is it that's unique about Kovars and the way you approach martial arts? Because I know that people look up to you, both you individually and you, the organization that the two of you have created. I mean, and come to you for advice and counsel and pay you a fair amount of money to help them become more like you. What is it that they're looking for?
So, I would say that first and foremost, we kind of had a jump that I've always been really good about having people that are good at things that I'm not. So I had my older brother, Tim, as my partner for a long time, which really allowed me, my friends that might have been just as good of instructors and just as passionate, had a business to run as well. And I was always involved in the business. To this day, I know what's going on, but I don't execute. I'm able to have other people do a lot of the hard work. And so when we were formulating business systems and teaching systems, I had full reign to really develop the staff and write training manuals, et cetera, because I wasn't bogged down with the other stuff. And then more recently, of course, when Mr. Chamberlain came on as in 2006 and took over as CEO in 2007, it was magnified even more.
So perfect segue. You were a wildly successful tech exec with Gateway Computer and other organizations. How did that shift come about? How did you wind up in the role as CEO of Kovar?
My daughter, I put her into classes. The Wednesday folder came home, and I wanted her.
Wednesday folder.
Yeah, remember those? And inside was a month free at Kovar's, and so I enrolled her. And about a month after she started, she turned to me one night and said, "Why aren't you doing this too?" And words to that effect. And so I started training, and then got to know Dave and Tim, and the rest is history.
Well, the rest can't be history. I mean, you're no offense, you're an old guy doing karate in the studio.
Yeah.
It doesn't, the next week you're not CEO. I mean, how did
Well,
that,
here's the
how did
deal.
that
He was at
come
the time, he
about?
was working out of town, and he was only training on weekends. So, he was coming like Friday, Saturdays, right? He'd be in town and one training weekends. And I met him on a summer kickboxing class that I was teaching in the morning. We hit it off really quick. And then you had just, as we were transitioning, right after we met you, shortly after we met you, he just sold his company, Versada, right? And he was just kind of freelancing, and Rick had met him. We wanted some input from him, and we just go, any chance we can get you to work for us for a little while? And he said, yeah, I got some free time. Let me see what we can do. And we just didn't let him leave.
So you got negotiated in some free training?
Something to that.
That was probably all you got in the early years.
Yeah.
So we met, was it 2005?
I think so.
2005.
Yeah.
And at the time, you guys had some pretty aggressive and ambitious thoughts relative to the future of Kovar's. Can you walk us back to that time?
I remember distinctly when our other partner, Rick Campbell, called. I was at home. It was on a Sunday afternoon. I still remember the call. And I'd been forewarned by a mutual friend this guy might be calling. He wanted to do a national presence. He thought that there was, him and his son were doing martial arts, and he looked into it, and there was no, it was just a mom and pa. It was this cottage industry that he felt could be, developed. And I wasn't really that interested at first. Tim was pretty interested, and we just kept the conversation going for a couple of years. And at the time we had 4 locations, and we finally, I think he called in 2003 probably, and it took probably a year for something to kind of evolve, and before we signed on and decided we were going to do a national expansion and try to have 100 schools by 2015. Yeah.
And then part of that was, in order to do that, you were going to need capital.
Yep.
Obviously, established brand.
Yep.
Probably could have attracted capital from a number of people. For those who might be listening or watching, can you talk them through sort of what was going through your mind as you contemplated both the excitement as well as some of the concerns and fears that you were going through at the time of all of a sudden going from a partner that you knew to bringing on partners that you didn't know?
Well, initially it was all really exciting, and we'd never failed. Like every time we opened up a school, it just worked. Why would we have any doubt? Why would this not work as well? And so I remember originally thinking that our aspirations were really, really aggressive. But I remember thinking, I'm just the karate guy, man. What do I know? These guys are smart business guys. If they think we can do it, I guess we can do it. I remember being optimistic, but not necessarily realistic with our goals. Especially I was charged with my thing was finding and training staff. That was kind of my. And I go, oh man, because it takes a long time to get the right person in the right position. So there was more excitement. Like obviously, if you don't believe you can do something, you don't even get out of bed anymore. Right. So I mean, so that was kind of our initially, and there'll be some challenges, but we'll figure it out. That was the thought
And
process.
I introduced Steve, I think, to Rick Campbell. So Rick had called me, we'd become kind of friendly, and so I told him that you guys should.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Really? So you introduced Steve to Rick?
I did, and
for some reason I didn't know you.
Yeah,
know
and
that.
I think we probably had fear of failure, as everybody would have, somewhere in the back of their mind, but also fear of success, losing control, of the operation, and we didn't want that either. So probably both emotions.
And then rolled it out. Some things went well. Some things didn't go so well, which is more times than not the case, right?
Right.
Maybe talk through what happened when
Let me start, and I'll turn it over to Dave. And that was that we went from 4 to 20 locations in about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And the issue, this was 2005, 6. The market was real high. I can't blame it on the economy. We cannot blame it on really that's.
But that was a reality.
Well, there's part of it, but the deal was so we had these really high rents in these, and then because of that, we had some people that were really good people, but maybe they weren't the right person, nor did they have the right amount of training. And so all of a sudden we found ourselves, massively overextended, which is about the time that Dave came on board. And I remember, never forget one thing he said one time. We're realizing the writing is, this is going to be harder than we thought. We have all these issues that are starting to, and of course you remember all this as well. Yeah. And I remember him saying something to me that just gave me this massive amounts of confidence. And he said, my belief about myself is I'm at my best when things are at their worst, but there's hope. And that we'll get through this. And that was, like, for me, very, it was very reassuring and comforting.
And if you manage a martial arts school, there are 1,001 little details. So it takes a system to really make it work. But if you've got schools that are 2,000 miles away, it's really, really hard to manage that. And so we have to be careful that we don't get too far extended, and we did.
So you had this track record of nothing but success, as you said, and all of a sudden things aren't working out, which undoubtedly had to trigger a whole set of emotions and stress and strain and everything else. Can you talk to us about if you can remember what that felt like? You remember, huh?
So there's one
like it was yesterday
incident in particular that Dave and I were trying to figure out how we were going to make payroll for like $30,000 in about 3 hours, and we'd already exhausted. He put in personal money, I put in personal money, and we all kinds of that kind of stuff, and then you have to go down in front of Monday staff, the team's there, and we can't let them feel what we're feeling. So you got to act like everything's great. All right, we're gonna have a great week, and inside you're going, holy crap. Well, my thing that sticks out for me was we had a bunch of people telling us maybe you should consider reorganization, right? And this may not work. And I went down to do some jiu-jitsu. I was training with one of my students, and he put me in this. He got me in I kind of let him get me in a choke. He was if you know what I mean by that. I've been choked out plenty of times by guys that are better than me. But if you have someone that maybe it's like handicap. You're going to let a guy get in a bad position. You're going to fight out of it. All of a sudden, I realized, holy moly, man! And there's this feeling that you get when you're grappling and you're tired and you're fatigued and someone's close. It's claustrophobic. It's kind of like panicky, right? And of course, all you have to do is tap, and you're done. But I remember thinking, holy moly, man, this is pretty intense. I might have to tap. But there was a guy watching us. And so what that meant was if I passed out, I'd be okay. He would stop the match, right? Mm-hmm. And so I remember thinking, I could tap right now, but I don't have to. Not yet. I will if I have to. So I relaxed my neck, and I managed to fight out of it. And when I got done, the metaphor hit me with our business. We could tap out if we wanted to, but we don't have to. Not yet. Let's fight through this. And of course, that was his mindset all along. And for me, that was like a pivotal moment. Like, okay, it might be a while, but we're going to get through this. Just going to take it a day.
I love what you said. Is part of being able to fight through it was relax, right? And get your head about you again, as opposed because most people, if you're in that high stress, high anxiety time, that is not when you're thinking your clearest. That's certainly not when you're most creative. Yeah. And one of the, some of the CEOs that we've seen who fought their way through tough times, that's one of the things that I have identified as a common thread. And oftentimes it's a strong spiritual faith of one kind or another, right? Yours is probably martial arts, and some of them may be religious in nature, but they always had this calm about them that allowed them to stay creative and stay thoughtful and stay innovative in spite of the fact that they were feeling choked in some ways.
Yeah, true.
Now, you guys in this circumstance, it's tough enough when you're going through that yourselves, right? But in this case, you had a new capital partner, I know because it was us, right? So no holds barred here, honest and transparent, because that's the only way that these kinds of sessions are valuable, right? So what was that like? How did that dynamic play out? Obviously, you have your fears of, oh my God, if things don't work out, here's what's going to happen, and so on and so forth. And, from your perspective, and we've never had this conversation, so it's great. So, but please, have it honest and candid. How was it? I mean, it was tough for all of us.
Right, absolutely.
But the good news is we're still here, and you guys can both kick my butt, and you're not, so I'm taking it.
Yeah, you guys were great from the very first day, and right up through the time that we exited, it was great. And the reason that we liked you so much is that you brought real value every month to the table, which was really important to us because we needed help. And you also didn't put any pressure on us. I've been in situations where the venture capital firm comes in, and then it's not a pleasant experience. And you never did that. I think you may have felt sorry for us, or you realized we were putting just as much pressure on ourselves as you could ever put on us. But it was always professional, lots of help, and actually we thought of you as a friend.
Yeah, that's kind. How about before I respond to that? I'll give
Kovar's feedback. I think all along, I mean, you've got a job to do. We got a job to do. You were always respectful and gracious, and I think you were aware of how hard we were working. Mm-hmm. We never doubted the fact that you didn't think we weren't doing everything that we could, and so we. Boy, our conversations, I know Steve would come out every month and we'd have great conversations. He always had good input. And so, we wanted to, you were certainly firm, right? In what you wanted out of the agreement, which was fair. We signed on the dotted line, but there was never a doubt in my mind that you did in the long run want the best for everyone.
And you were always really positive. I don't know if you remember the time you came out and we had this big discussion. It was in the other building back in the old days with the training center. And you were talking about laboratories of development. Instead of making the physical structure your expansion, make it digitally. Let's do it from a consultative standpoint. And you don't have to do brick and mortar and 5-year leases. And so you can have your remaining schools, which were 8, become your development laboratories. And whatever they're doing in their everyday activities, you bring those forward, and then you can put those out as solutions to other martial arts schools. It was great.
I do remember that. I was in that upstairs.
Yeah,
in that upstairs facility. But still, there were hard conversations, right? They were hard for us. They were hard for you. I remember also the other, time when you were talking about how we're going to make payroll and some of those conversations. And then there was a time where we actually stepped in, right, and tried to help manage the cash flow to try to help it be as efficient as it possibly could. I'm sure there were other selfish motives behind that as well, but there was at least a basis of trying to be helpful. What were some of the things that jump out? I mean, you touched graciously and very kindly touched on a couple of them, but things that sort of stood out in your mind as being pivotal elements of allowing you to go from that point, which most businesses, I will tell you, and certainly most transactions, go through that time where they go, you know what, it might be time to tap out, or I may pass out and this is just beyond my physical capacity to fight through this. But obviously you guys didn't do it, and now you're flourishing. So were there particular moments that stand out that were the catalyst that allowed you to do that?
So, I think we both agreed there was this one November where, we were like kind of the lowest point that we had. But one of the things was Dave was really creative, and I certainly helped a bit, but creative with getting through the rough months. Like one month we told all our landlords, sorry guys, we don't have, you can do what you want. We don't have the money. We're not going to pay you this month, but we'll pay you your full month next month and 10% more for the next year, and we'll get caught up. And the next month we did that with it. So that got us through 1 month. Yeah. And then we had to get through the next month. And there was 1 month we went out to all our instructors. We hate to do this and said, okay, you need to get some paid in fulls for the next few years of tuition. That's the only way. So we kind of took 1 month at a time, tried not to cannibalize the long-term benefit of the business, and slowly the light got bigger and bigger.
Yeah, we made progress. Every year the losses were a little bit less, and we put guardrails up. So we took everything and centralized it. Everything, you couldn't spend not a dime, but not even a penny without my approval. Yeah. And so everyone kind of banded together, and it was probably the best time for morale in a way, because everybody was in it to win.
Yeah.
It's our survival.
Yeah. We had some employees that when it started getting challenging, like 2007, when because we were losing a lot of money in that time frame, but we had some money in the bank, so we could do it for a little while. But said, you know what, it's good luck, but we got to take off. And so we lost a few people that were good people, but those that stuck around, we were in battle, and they were side by side. They were in the trenches with us, and there was never a doubt. We had several people in the management team that went without paychecks more than one time. glad to say we got them all caught up. There's a lot of people that went without their bonuses for quite a while, for months at a time, because it just wasn't there. But nobody ever complained about it. Everybody just rolled up their sleeves and just worked through it.
And do you think that there's something about the martial arts mindset and dogma, for lack of a better word, that made that more the case for you guys?
I'd like to say that my brother Tim and I created a culture where people wanted to be a part of it, and we've always gone out of our way to treat our people well and want them to want to be on the team. And then, of course, when Mr. Chamberlain came on, that was only magnified. His leadership, to be able to come into the setting where martial arts is the hierarchy is very clear. The guy with the highest belt rank is the guy in charge, kind of, sort of, and for Mr. Chamberlain to come in, by the way, he came in as a black belt, but he was a first degree black belt. So in our world, that wouldn't be considered, like high ranking, but he very quickly grabbed the respect of all the team. And there was no doubt, like it took no time at all for them to go, okay, not only do I like this guy, but he's a hard worker and he's intelligent and I want to follow him. And so he took the culture that we already had and just made it better.
Do you think that there are some of those elements of the martial arts culture that you and Tim developed within Kovars that businesses that are in different industries that don't have that tie can grasp? And if so,
100%.
What are those and how would you suggest that they do that?
Well, I think first and foremost, we kind of emphasize what we call the mastery mindsets. It's kind of certain viewpoints, right? That and I'm amazed. For example, the first one is I take great care of myself because the world needs me at my best. Mm-hmm. I'm amazed by the disconnect that really intelligent people have to how they treat their body and what they put in and how they sleep and how they exercise or not, and then their level of health and success and happiness. And so it kind of, martial arts kind of starts with, it comes from the samurai mindset. Samurai means to serve, that's a little rough, and a samurai's job was to be at its best so that he could serve his shogun, the master of the castle, so to speak. And so he owed it to his circle to be at his best, not from selfish reasons, although it feels good to be at your best, right? So that's kind of the standpoint, and I think inherent in martial arts is this martial arts tend to be by nature more personal development oriented than others are. Like how many people that they went to high school with that haven't matured one bit since high school? Yeah. Well, you don't find that in this because these guys are aspiring to be better and these gals are aspiring to be better. And so I think also the nature of martial arts being potentially violent, it gives you a chance to kind of embrace your shadow, so to speak, not to get too Carl Gustav Jung on you, and therefore, when you do that, you're able to kind of, the opposite of it is shining to the world, so to speak. So I think it brings out the best in people.
Right. And one of the things that Tim and Dave stressed from the very beginning is building the team. So, I mean, we take credit for the goodness things that have happened since we turned it around, but we did it with a lot of really hardworking people. We just had our retreat this past weekend up in Colombo Resorts, and there were people sitting around the campfire, about 40 people. We had one person come up and stand in front of the fire, and we talked about them and told them how much we appreciated them, and so went through all the things that we appreciated about them. And it's compelling. It raises the goosebumps, and it's the same. It's the very thing that he started 40 years ago.
So, how would, again, someone who has a more diverse populace of employees and team members that don't all share that same philosophical approach,
sure,
any advice to them on how they can instill that same sense of commitment amongst a potentially more diverse team?
Of course, we always both have a lot to say. So I think first and foremost, the old phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, but you can salt the oats. And that meaning that, you got to find a way. You have to have the right people. You have to start with the right person. If they're not the right person, there's nothing you can do. You can put, you can put really good, salami on. I don't eat salami, of course. Okay, but but if it's moldy bread, it doesn't matter, right? So you have to start with the right product. So assuming they have the right person, I think that the big desire for people is to feel appreciated and respected and needed. And do people do that? That would be the place that I would start. You have to have the right person, and then are you trying to get there? Are you using your authority with them, or are you influeing to bring out the best of them?
Right. And you say a lot of times we got to hire right, we've got to train them right, and then treat them right. And so it's not enough just to you got to first, what is it I'm looking for? And then find that person and then develop them and give back to the community. So we get our team feeling good about themselves and about what they're doing when they're out working for the Cancer Society or when they're doing a fundraising for the American Heart Association or whatever it is. Giving back to the community really solidifies that.
Right. So we've talked a little bit about sort of where you've come from, what your plans were, a little bit of the retrenching. And now I want to, kind of evolve to where you are now, which is you sort of went from playing defense and hunkering down and saying, okay, how are we going to survive? How are we going to satisfy these pesky investors that are out there that for some reason want their money back? And now you've been through that, you've embraced it, you've done all the things that you need to do, and now you're flourishing again. Tell us how that felt to move from kind of playing defense to being able to turn the switch back on and get back to playing offense.
It wasn't easy. It was rough, actually. And you think, really? I had gotten us centralized to the point where you couldn't do anything without my approval. And now I got to let go of that. So I've got to be able to delegate again, which I'm a big believer in. But we were, in many cases, stepping over the dollar to pick up the dime because we were that close to the end. And so I had to, now someone wants to spend some money, really? How much? And it was peanuts, but I couldn't let go. And I really had to, go through a whole retrenching of, what delegation and let my people, because I'm a big believer in letting them empower them and they'll do great things.
All right.
So that was kind of interesting. And now we've got plans, but it's always team first. How do we get our team involved?
Yeah, our X factor is our team. So without a doubt, it's like I like to think I'm pretty confident. I know he's pretty confident. But really, it's together. It's what we can do. With our tenure with our company, we've got a bunch of really committed people that believe in what we're doing. The other thing that I would say on that last comment is there that a company's got to find a battle cry, a cause that their people can believe in. Actually, that's one of the things when we were really we had a strong cause, and it was called survival. And we've had to create stuff since then. Once we, and by the way, we're not out of the woods. Every business has its challenges. We've still, fighting the battle. And we've, got, trying to solidify and finalize a lot of things that are still going on. But we've had to work really hard to make sure that our people don't get too comfortable because, so we've had to make it a point to say, okay, where are we focusing the troops?
We wrote a why statement. Shape the world is what we're all about. And, a mission statement and a vision. And we talk about it constantly with our folks. It's one team. And we've had this one team mantra for 4 or 5 years because you can't just desire to have a great culture. You got to work every day to build it. It's just as important as building your financials.
And, every week in staff meetings when we get the team together, the first thing we talk about is, financial success, fine. But, hey, what's success is tell us a turnaround story. Tell us a story about a kid who turned the corner, or, a kid who was able to stand up against the bully, or the lady that now has her identity back through her training, and we really put a heavy focus on the why we do this. And also our support centers behind the scenes, we really try to really get them to focus on them doing their jobs, allowing us to affect so many people. And we've had really good success with that model.
So back to your earlier question, though, if a company is struggling, knowing why you're doing what you do and making it, we're not just teaching martial arts, we're shaping the world, and that gets people excited. People want a purpose.
You guys were very gracious in your response relative to how it was to have outside investors, and particularly us in that. And a huge part of what enabled that, I think, is also something that other people can learn from. You touched on the fact that we knew, number one, you guys were all in, and that you were working your buns off to do everything you possibly could to make it happen. Number two, that you genuinely cared. But I would say probably the biggest thing that enabled us to continue to be as collaborative and trusting and supportive was the middle word I just said, which was trust, because we knew 100%, the decisions may not always be right. The outcome may not always be what we had all hoped and envisioned, but there was never a single day that either Steve or I had any question about the character of the people who are making the decision and whether or not you guys were working hard to do the right thing. I think when times get tough, there's a natural tendency to question people's motivations and their behaviors, because many people, when they get stressed, when they get in that moment that you were talking about, Dave, they get stressed, they start behaving differently than their natural, or maybe they go back to their natural, I don't know.
Right.
But they don't behave the same way that you would hope that they would behave, right? And you guys never wavered. We never had one question whether or not you were being honest and truthful and dealing with us in integrity with your best intentions and your best efforts. And I mean, I think that was, if you were trying to, since we really haven't probably had this conversation sooner than we should have, that would be something I would hope that you would take and pass along to everybody that you interact with who finds themselves in that situation, because it's, if you can create that impression through it being sincere, right, with other people, you'll get the outcome much better than if you start to do things that you'd be embarrassed to tell your friends you were actually doing.
I heard a quote one time: adversity doesn't make the person, it reveals the person. And I love that line. And part of this for me is, how do I want to be revealed? It's like that kind of kept how do we want to be revealed? We want to, and how many of us have known that someone's a good person? We just had an incident happen with a former staff. Anyway, long story short, it's like, really, he did that? Well, yeah, he's a good guy, but he's weak, if that makes sense. Yeah. And that was, something that, and it was for me, if I honestly, and I mean this with all sincerity, if this guy wasn't my partner, I don't know how we would have done it, and I'm sure you would agree, just from the outside, it's because having somebody, a sounding board, and somebody that that's all in, that, it's like it gave me the strength to be stronger than I would have probably been able to be otherwise.
He cited he recited the Man in the Arena from Theodore Roosevelt at the retreat at the end. It was great. And so we knew we're going to jump in, we're going to make some mistakes, but at least we're going to fight. And honestly, sincerity, if we felt like there was something that DCA could have done differently or better, we're honest guys, and we tell you. Honestly, it was a great relationship and remains that way.
Yeah, and we valued it a great deal. So, having now been through that, right? Started the business from humble beginnings, had success very early, probably beyond what you ever envisioned it would be. Saw even more opportunity, went after it with gusto. Didn't work out, had to retrench, work your way through it, back out the other side. What are some of the learnings that you guys have both had from having gone through that entire spectrum of emotions and experiences that you think other people could benefit from?
Personally, I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't do it again that way, right? But experience is what makes you. You know what I'm saying? And life is great, and there's it's so easy to go, what could have been, coulda, shoulda, woulda, if I would have done this way versus that. But all in all, we have grown and matured and learned, and good judgment comes from bad judgment remembered. It's kind of like we've made a lot of mistakes, but we've learned a lot from them, and it's given. And the other thing is I do not at all. There was times when we were like clearly, just trying to find a way. I'd go to the grocery store with my ATM, hoping there's going to be enough money to buy, because because we'd clean out our accounts to keep things in business. And now I so appreciate little things that I took for granted before, because I never had this issue.
Like going to the ATM without anxiety.
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, we believed this before, but we believe it even more now. Never give up. If you've got good intentions, a good product, and a great team, then don't give up. And we'll tweak some things. We're more circumspect now about when we get a lot of opportunities that people bring to us, and we're careful not to get ourselves involved in things that are going to take a lot of our time. But at the same time, we also are taking some risks, because there are things that we need to make sure that we're continuing to evolve and get the company to move forward, not just for the company, but for our employees, for our staff. There are opportunities that if we could make some things happen it'll open up doors for them that they haven't even dreamt of.
And we want our people that have been with us for a long time to never ever think, I wish I would have gone. You know, we want them to be glad of their time they spent with us, and so we're trying, to make sure we build something that is, when we decide to hang up the gloves, so to speak, that we've still got this organization that's taking care of its team and
It leaves a positive legacy. It sounds like
absolutely.
for the two of you. So to the extent, without giving away any secrets, anything about the next generation of what you aspire for Kovars to be and look like that you want to share?
Yeah, I don't mind sharing that we're having our best year ever, which is nice to have. We'll probably expand.
Needing investors?
Actually, let's talk.
Never again. No disrespect, sir.
But we'll probably expand. We'll probably expand the number of locations because we found out we open schools really, really well. And as long as we've got a team and we can, be aware and control the environment nearby, then who's to say if we don't edge out a little bit? We continue to look at different opportunities. So there's some things we're doing in other sports that will. Because a lot of sports academies on the back end look just like a martial arts academy. All the operational things that you have to do operate the same way. So we're edging out a little bit there, and we're looking at some technology. Technology would allow him to teach a class from California that gets piked around the world.
Yeah.
And so we're experimenting with some really interesting technology that the NBA and other people are using.
And we continue to grow our we didn't grow brick and mortar, but through expanding, so we do our coaching program is going to go. By the way, what I meant never again is never again are we going to get and do something that we haven't thought out thoroughly.
No offense taken.
Okay, all right. It's nice to not go every, it's nice not to have as much debt.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And so we are right now. It's a matter of we've got our bread and butter, our schools that are doing nicely, and that's. And we're making sure to guard that, guard the golden egg, so to speak. And we have a lot right now. We have so much different direction we can go. It's a matter of what not to do, which is a happy problem.
They said at the conference last week is, a lot of times it's the stuff that you don't do that you really need to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I love you guys. I love your story, and I appreciate you coming in and being willing to share it with the rest of the world.
Honor, privilege.
That's great. Absolutely. Yeah, we appreciate you guys being in our corner and all these years and believing us in the beginning. And
yeah, we consider you friends. So
all right. That will carry to the grave.
Right.